I am going to get started because I'm very excited to bring this topic to you guys. Not me, Shimonly, us as a community. We are bringing you a beautiful, beautiful webinar today. I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Nina, and I am joining you all the way from the beautiful South Africa. I'm a facilitator at Shimonly. We are an international life skills education initiative, and we are passionate about bringing awareness to the crucial need for essential life skills in education. We are committed to providing invaluable insights and resources for you, our community, students and educators alike, to help you grow in your professional and your personal capacity. So I'm, as I said, excited to join you today for an enlightening webinar, which is Bridging Worlds, Empowering Educators to Foster Cross-Cultural Competence, featuring the brilliant Chris O'Shaughnessy. So let me tell you a little bit about Chris. Chris is celebrated for his captivating fusion of storytelling, humor, thought-leading insights on globalization and cross-cultural understanding. And I met Chris a little bit a while ago, and he is magnetic. His presence captivates global audiences at international schools, educational institutions, businesses, and government agencies. Chris has just arrived back home from a very expansive tour all over Europe, and his experience in over 100 countries where he has worked and traveled and lived offers unique insights that resonates widely. His book, Arrivals, Departures, and Adventures in Between, shares firsthand experiences of our ever-globalizing world, establishing him as the expert to guide us today in navigating the challenges of culture in today's dynamic world. Chris, we at Shimonly love connecting and communicating with like-minded professionals who share our mission in empowering individuals with life skills education. Our collaboration today highlights the critical link between cross-cultural competence and life skills development for students and educators alike. So I am super ready to get into this, and I'm sure you all are too. So, Chris, the floor is yours. Over to you.
Oh, thank you so very much. It is a pleasure and an honor to get to be here. Thank you so much for joining us. I get very, very excited to talk about culture. So I'm thrilled a bit that you're here too. So culture, I find, is one of those things that we all know about in sort of an abstract sense, but defining it can actually be a little bit difficult. So I've done loads of research, and thankfully, very, very clever people have had scratchy heads and strokey beard meetings and come up with a lot of very good definitions of culture. So I thought we'd start just by looking at some of those definitions so that we know exactly what we're working with. And they range from sort of the very intricate down to the more simplistic. I think here are just a few of my favorites because there are loads of definitions. This one is from Joseph Scholl's. Culture is a process of being, a whole body experience, engaging heart, mind, fears, aspirations, survival instincts, and desire for connection with fellow humans. I like that one because I'll be honest with you, I had never thought of survival instincts being wrapped into culture, but they definitely are. Another very good one is from a book by De Capo and Winterguest. It says, the shared beliefs, norms, and attitudes that guide a group of people's behavior and help them explain the world. And I particularly like that one because that really is one of the main reasons that we engage in culture, is it helps us to explain the world around us, which is quite important. Yet another clever definition. We've got from Milton J. Bennett, a dynamic definition. Culture is a generalization about how a group of people coordinate meaning and action among themselves. Which again, I think takes into account the fact that culture involves action. It's not just the way we think, but it drives what we do. But I want to close definitions with my absolute favorite one, and it's from a guy named John Mole, and he says quite simply, culture is just how we do things around here. And I love that because, in all honesty, that's really what culture is. It's just how we do things around here. And sometimes we can forget that around here's are all different. And again, many, many clever people have come up with different ways to explain culture. We have a lot of imagery for culture, and I love imagery. I can remember images far better than I can definitions, even though how we do things around here is relatively simple and easy to remember. But let me give you some of the I've got the top probably three, the top three images that are often used for culture. We've got an iceberg, and this one is used often to explain to us that culture is so much more than meets the eye. And the way icebergs work, apparently, is what we see above the surface is a minority of what's actually there. I think I heard the statistic, and I might just be making it up now, but only 10% of the iceberg is actually above the water, that actually 90% is hidden from view. And we can look at culture in much the same way, to be perfectly honest. What we see and what we interpret culturally is just it's the tip of the iceberg. Culture actually involves an awful lot more going on below the surface. So that illustration is often used, and icebergs just don't get enough attention lately. So I feel like we got to point them out and use them for imagery. Then we've got onions. Onions often used as an image for culture. And that's because onions famously have layers, and culture has layers. Once again, there's so much more going on below the surface. And as you peel back the layers of our culture, it reveals more and more about what drives us. But I wanna go with, I'm slightly biased here, but my favorite image for culture is actually that of a lens. I love the idea of interpreting culture as the lens through which we look at reality. And I think this is incredibly important because we'll get into this a little bit later. But one of the great things about this image is the reality that we have the capacity to use multiple lenses. At some point, I'm told, we will get old enough that I'm going to need reading glasses. At some point, it's just going to happen. And I'm prepared for it. I want to have really, I'm just going to have, I think it'll make me look smart. I feel like there's something about getting a pair of reading glasses and you put them on, and automatically people think that you must be more clever. But the reality is, culture can actually work in the same way. Culture can be a set of lenses, and we have the capacity to use multiple lenses, which I think is actually very, very important. In fact, I would argue that one of the big pitfalls with culture is forgetting that it's dynamic, forgetting that there are multiple cultures and multiple ways that we can interpret things. So, taking that image a little further, I like the image of a zoom lens. And here's the reason that I like that as it pertains to culture, because a zoom lens is marvelously dynamic. If you had an incredibly powerful zoom lens, let's say we're stationed on the moon for this illustration. If you were to zoom out entirely, you could fit the entire planet Earth inside your lens. You would look, and if you zoomed out all the way, you could see the whole world. And in some ways, that's a really good place to start, because zooming out culturally and as far as identity, you are one of 7 point something billion people on the planet. And so at that level, zoomed out, you have something in common with everybody, in that we are all here on the planet. Of course, you could zoom in, and if you were to go to the other extreme, if you zoomed in all the way, you could fill the screen with just you. You could zoom in only on you, and you are completely and utterly unique. Your set of experiences, your DNA, your nurturing, your upbringing, your everything is one of a kind. And the thing is that there are so many different zoom stops on the way in between those two. You could zoom out just a little bit between only you and everyone on the planet, and you can zoom to all sorts of things. You could zoom to nationality and fit just everyone in your nation on the screen. You could zoom to gender, you could zoom to politics, you could zoom to religion, you could zoom to so many different things. And this is why I think the image of culture as a lens is important, is that we have the power to zoom in and to zoom out. And one of the areas we seem to run into problems is when we don't zoom, is when we get stuck on one particular setting, is when we try to see culture just at one of those stops. And the reality is we have the power to see culture in multiple levels of stop, which is a really important thing. But human nature makes it hard to remember that culture is dynamic, that we can switch lenses. And so humans, whether we like it or not, tend to be prone to projecting. And what I mean by that is that we tend to assume that the way we do things, the way we see things, must be how everybody does. And it's not anything necessarily intentional. It really is just human nature until you run into something that proves differently. And this can be on minor things that you wouldn't even think about. I grew up moving around all over the place. And so there were things that were quite normal to me that I didn't realize weren't normal to anybody else. I can remember the first time I had a friend from the United States come visit me while I was living in Belgium. And it was the power plugs that got them. They just couldn't believe that the little plugs in the wall were so very different. And to me, that was perfectly normal. In fact, I remember telling them, listen, as an American, if you think European plugs are interesting, just wait until you see British plugs or Indian plugs. They're phenomenal. They're huge. They have buttons on them. They're very, very safe. But the reality is, that's something that had never crossed my friend's mind, because the only kind of plugs he had ever come across were the kind in his home country. He just assumed everybody in the world must use the same electricity plugs. Now, it's a really, really silly example, but there are countless things in our lives that until we run into something different, we assume everyone must do it like we do it. And that's projection. And we don't just do it with power plugs. We don't even just do it with language. We actually do it with all sorts of things. In fact, culture is full of little areas that until we run into something different, we don't realize that we're projecting. Our view of time is a really, really good example. In the West, and for much of the English-speaking world, time is viewed as a currency. And if you think about it, the words that we use in English to describe time betray that. You can spend time, you can waste time, you can invest time. Those are all currency words. And so, without realizing it, if you're an English-speaking Westerner, you tend to project that view of time. You think, well, everybody sees time as a commodity. Everyone sees time as a currency. Everyone does not. Many, many cultures actually see time more as a vessel. And linguistically, that's the way time works. And if you take this further, what it means is we're projecting a set of expectations. So if time to you is a currency that can be spent or invested or wasted, it means that things like punctuality become really, really important. If a meeting starts at 9 o'clock, then you are wasting everyone's time if you don't show up at 9 o'clock. However, culturally, if you saw time more as a vessel, more as a fluid thing that facilitates relationships, then being a little bit late to a meeting because you're in a great conversation actually makes a ton of sense. Because time isn't a currency to be wasted, it's a fluid sort of river that we're floating in that allows for relationships. And so when we project, we can upset people unintentionally. Because if you see time as a currency and it's something to be wasted, when you come up against someone who sees time more as a vessel to hold relationships, you can upset each other because you can have someone who's late to a meeting, and by your system of currency, that's wasteful. Whereas for their system, where time is more a vessel, it's not wasteful at all. It's perfectly normal. But we get upset when we project. Speech patterns are another really interesting one. The way and the cadence with which we speak in various languages is not universal. Even if we just focus on English, in American and British English, for the most part, it's polite to have a little bit of pause at the end of when you speak before someone else speaks. And in Western English, we would think that this is a way of showing attention, because if you wait till I'm finished speaking, give a little tiny pause, then I think, oh, you're listening to what I say before you speak. How very polite. That's not universal, though. In fact, in Japanese, which is one of the most high context cultures there are, in Japanese, there's a much longer pause. In Japanese, it's polite in conversation to give maybe up to a 2 to 3 second pause. In English, that would make us very, very uncomfortable. If we were having a conversation and you waited a whole 3 seconds to speak repeatedly after I finished speaking, I might start to assume that, well, I must not be that exciting, and you're really not engaged, and really what I'm saying is boring. And the reality is, in Japanese, that's considered very, very polite. It would be awkward in English. Then we have on other ends of the scale, Italians. In Italian, it's polite to start speaking before somebody else even finishes. In Italian conversation, there should never be any dead space whatsoever. And so conversation overlaps. If you did that too much in English, we would assume, well, you're not even paying attention. You started talking before I even finished. But the reality is, we're projecting. The assumption that the pause between speech is universal is just another example of us projecting, of us thinking that the way we do things is how everybody does things. So whether it's electricity plugs or the speed with which we speak, or even our view of time, all of these things actually differ far more than we realize. The danger with projection is that so much less is universal than we think it is. And in humans, we tend to start from what very clever people call an ethnocentrist stance. And ethnocentrism has these three facets up on your screen. In general, it's a bit like a journey. Until you realize it, we all start with some degree of denial. And again, it's really just the fact that we only have ourselves as a standard of comparison. So we start with denial, which is that, well, my way of doing things is the only way of doing things. The plugs that I see are the only way plugs work. And time, of course, everyone sees time. That why wouldn't they? Until we know better, this is just the natural place that we start. And again, it's not because we're innately evil or mean or trying to. It's just that we only have ourselves as a standard of comparison. But then if we move on and we do experience other things, usually the first step in cultural ethnocentrism is a degree of defense, which is, well, no, this is how I know things, and that makes sense to me, and I want to defend it. Which is why when my friends saw European plugs, they said, those plugs are dumb. I said, no, they're not, they're not dumb. They're just different. And so the first step is often defense, because we've been used to doing things and seeing things and interpreting things a certain way. And when we come up against something different, it can actually be really uncomfortable. Whether this is teaching styles, perhaps you've run up against a different teaching style, and the automatic thought is, no, this is the way things should be done. I started out school in a very small village in the UK where manners were of the utmost importance. In fact, it didn't matter too much academics, really. As long as you were polite, you would progress through the system. And I can remember being quite defensive when I encountered other education styles. I thought, well, no one's focusing on manners. This is wrong. I need to protect manners. And that is usually the first step. We start with denial. My way is the only way. We move on to defense. I've got to protect my way. And then the last part of ethnocentrism is a degree of minimization. It's usually when we realize, okay, other things are happening, but that's only because they haven't done it my way. My way is best. And if they just knew my way, they would do it too. So this is the belief, and we see it in education, that, well, our system is the best system. We see it in politics. We see it in all sorts of things. The idea is, I accept that there are other ways of doing things, but really, if people could, they would do it my way. They just don't know how. Now, sometimes that is where we stop, but with a little bit of work, with a little bit of intentionality, we can actually move from ethnocentrism into what we call ethno-relativism. And ethno-relativism, again, is the next step on the journey. So after we've gone through denial, my culture is the only culture, defense, I got to protect my way of doing things, and then into minimization. I guess there are other ways, but mine is still best. Ethno-relativism is when we begin with the level of acceptance, when we go, okay, there are actually multiple ways of doing things. There are other plugs in the world. There are other speech patterns. There are different ways to view time or all sorts of other things. And that level of acceptance, that's something that we hope for. In the world today, and this is a whole other presentation, there's not time to get into it now. In the world today, we talk a lot about how much we value tolerance. And I would argue that tolerance really is actually only about this level. Tolerance is when we get to acceptance. Tolerance is saying, all right, there are other ways. I get it. But I think we can do even better. And beyond acceptance, we get to adaptation. And that is where we start to actually employ the other ways that people do things. Adaptation is when we say, well, I have my culture and my view of things, but I can see circumstances where someone else's culture or way of doing things is actually quite useful. Whether it's eating styles, whether it's communication styles, no matter what it is, being able to increase your tool set basically to add more colors to the palette that you paint the world with. Adaptation means we use more of those things. And finally, we have integration. Integration is where we don't just accept other things, where we don't just adapt and use those other things, but where those other things actually become part of us, where we take on a sense of ownership, where we stop so much with the this is the way they do it and this is the way I do it, and begin to accept, oh, actually, I can do things in loads of different ways. I have one more image relating to this that I want to share with you, and it's the image of a hallway, which is not very exciting, I'll admit. But I think it is very accurate. And I use third culture kids to explain sort of this last level of ethno-relativism, the integration. And third culture kids are a lot of the focus of my work. So let me explain to you very quickly why I think they're important and why we have a lot to learn from them as far as cultural agility. So third culture kids, the official definition, well, see if I can do it from memory. We're about to be either very impressed or horrified here. A third culture kid is an individual who, having spent a significant portion of their developmental years in a culture other than the parent's culture, develops a sense of relationship to all the cultures while not having full ownership of any. The sense of relationship ends up being those of a similar experience, even though their communication and systems of style come from loads of different places. Ooh, pretty impressed that I rattled all that off. Most importantly, though, a hallway is the easiest way to think about third culture kids because I like imagery. Being a third culture kid basically means you've experienced multiple cultures during your developmental years and a degree of transience. So we have a lot of third culture kids from the military brats are third culture kids, from missionary organizations, from international businesses, from NGOs and government organizations. Being a third culture kid usually means you moved around in different cultures while you were growing up, or you may have stayed in one place, but you were in an area where the people around you moved a lot. Now, why third culture kids are interesting is because their life culturally is very much like a hallway. We'll use me as a very simple example. We'll delve into my childhood because that's really why I've lured all of you here today, is just to deal with my childhood. This is just my way of doing a little bit of therapy at someone else's time and expense. I grew up as a military brat, so I was born in the UK. In fact, this American accent is learned. I didn't speak like this until later on in life. My natural accent is actually British English. So for the first part of my life, I was a small British child living in a small British village, doing small British things, drinking small British cups of tea, and life was good. And then my father, who worked for the US military, even though he's not British, he is American, but through some technicalities, my father was actually born in Germany and grew up in France, and is of Irish descent. So he joined the US military, like so many French, German, Irishmen do. It's a very, very old tale. So he came home and announced that we'd be moving. And so we did. We up and moved from my tiny village in England to the United States. And when I got there, I had to adapt. First of all, because I dressed about 10 years behind everyone else. This was in the early 90s, and we had to talk about fashion for this to make sense for a second. In the early 90s in the United States, neon colors had only just been invented, and so everybody dressed as if they had been attacked by a giant highlighter pen. Everyone was brightly colored. But that didn't come to the UK till quite a bit later. So I still dressed in quite dark, tight-fitting clothing. So I looked different. I was the only person in my school in the United States with a British accent, and so I sounded different. I stood out like a sore thumb. And so I realized I needed to adapt. And so I learned to dress differently. My sister and I watched huge amounts of American television so that we could learn to do an American pronunciation. We learned that to speak American, you have to say your A's and your R's very hard. In fact, even that word betrays it. In British English, we say hard, ironically quite softly. Whereas in American English, it's hard with an A and an R and a parade. And we thought that was all you had to do. It's not all you have to do. There is actually more to it. In fact, if you just say your A's and your R's really hard, you end up sounding like a pirate. And that was our first mistake. We ended up going to school just yelling at everyone, "Arr!" Sounded like pirates. But we did eventually adapt. I learned to speak with an American accent. I learned to dress in American clothing. I added a whole new cultural set to who I was. And that didn't mean that I replaced the British set. In fact, I couldn't, because after just a couple of years, my father announced that we were moving again, and we moved right back to the United Kingdom, where I was suddenly stood out again. I dressed way too bright for everyone. My accent was different, so I had to switch yet again. And as I continued moving as I grew up, the reality is I was able to add more and more cultural insights. And that is, again, what we were talking about, that idea of integration. For third culture kids, integration is just part of their life. There are some very complicated third culture kids. We have third culture kids who may have a Japanese father and an Argentinian mother, and they were born in Australia, and they're currently living in the UK, and they're planning on going to university in the Netherlands. Third culture kids, it becomes complicated if you ask where they're from. The reality is, though, they're demonstrating this hallway. You can think of their cultural identity as having multiple cultures connected by a hallway. And the thing is, actually, all of us do this to some degree. The way that you interact at work is probably different than how you'd interact with your family, which is probably different than how you'd interact with your friends. Each of those you can see as different rooms connected by the hallway of who you are. So even without giant national level differences, we're all maintaining multiple subcultures. And the reality is, integration is just that. It's being able to use different cultural rooms as needed and understanding they're all part of who we are. You're not someone different at home versus work. We might use that language, but it's still you. You're just using a different cultural set of norms. And so it's important to realize that we actually do have access to multiple cultures. Being able to achieve that intercultural integration, moving to ethno-relativism, is actually something that we do to a much smaller degree already. There's huge power if we begin to do that on a bigger scale. So I want to look at a few practicalities for how to do that. Hopefully, that give you some good imagery as far as sort of the idea of what we're going for. The idea, and I'll sum it up like this, is that culture is not mutually exclusive. It's not a zero-sum game. We have this very old view of culture that it is. We worry that if we take on too much of another culture, it eats into our culture. But it's not, and we have third culture kids as fantastic research to prove this. Culture is not a zero-sum game. Culture is not mutually exclusive. We have the capacity to have multiple rooms in our cultural house. And if we're going to achieve that, it takes a little bit of work. So I want to look at just a few practical ways that we can move from ethnocentrism to ethno-relativism, that we can hopefully expand the number of cultural rooms that we have access to. One way to do this is a phrase that I stole from a professor at university who was very wise. And I loved that he said this, and so I just keep repeating it. And he said, one of the best things that we can do in life is we can learn to process intellectually what we do intuitively. And what that really means is just giving language to the things that we intuit. I would argue that intuitively, as I said, you already do some degree of cultural switching in that you have different behavioral patterns for home and work and family. But if we draw that out, if we give it a name, if we give it an image, then we can begin to refine it and expand it. And so learning to process intellectually, giving language and framework to what we feel or do intuitively is one of the most important things that we can do educationally. So here's some ways that we can do that. Here's some intellectual vocabulary for some things that actually occur intuitively. In fact, we'll break culture down. There are some very clever people. This is from an organization called Knowledge Works. I get to work with them. They're based in Dubai, and they've come up with the 12 dimensions of culture. And in many ways, this is just putting language to a bunch of things that we already do intuitively. I'll go over them with you very, very quickly. But as I do, what I want you to think about is your own culture. Where do you fall on these scales? And then how would that compare to the people you're working with, to students that you're teaching, to the culture around you? Because when we have cultural differences is when we actually notice things. So very quickly, going through the 12 dimensions of culture, aspects of culture that we can process intellectually. These are basically the projections that we don't even realize are happening. So first, we have growth. And what that means is that when we tend to think of growth or moving forward, some people tend to think of growth in a relational sense through people, and some people tend to think of it more through resources. And we can be a little bit of both. Again, these are not mutually exclusive. It's more of a scale. So if you had all the power in the world to shape your organization, would you say the best way to move your organization forward would be better training of people or to provide better tools and resources and facilities? And it's okay to say both. That probably means you're 50-50. But realizing not everyone thinks the way you do. Some people, if you're very people orientated, so we need better training, you may come up against people who say, actually, we'd do better if we had better resources. It's not wrong. It's just a different value system. Then we have relationships, situational or universal. What I mean by this is some people look at relationships and they're very well compartmentalized. Some people look at relationships and they say, actually, this relationship works for this particular situation, but not all. And some people would say, well, if I've met them, I think they should fit in everywhere. It's the difference between saying, I want to keep my work life separate from my home life. That may be your stance, but some people would say, I just mix them all. Universal relationships. My boss comes over for dinner. Fantastic. He's a family friend. Not everybody thinks the same, though. For some people, having your boss over would be this terrible breach because we're more relationally situational. We want things compartmentalized. Then there's outlook. Our outlook means, are we looking forward and thinking we need to innovate? We need new things. Or is our outlook, we have traditions that have grounded us, let's maintain the traditions? And once again, you can be a little bit of both, but most people lean a certain way. And you can begin to see that if you assume everybody thinks like you do, you can run into trouble. If you're very innovative and you think the way to move forward is to come up with new ideas, you'd probably get really annoyed with someone who says, no, 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 tradition, we need to keep it stable. The reality is that's just a different value system. And understanding that their way is actually just as valid means you can begin to build bridges. Destiny is a great example of this. Some people see destiny as very self-directed. Destiny is something that you are in charge of. Some people would say they're more predestined. This actually has a lot to do with even our work ethic. Some people would say, you're just going to settle for the position you have. No, 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 you got to work. You got to pull yourself up. You can achieve more. And that's very self-directed. Whereas some people would say, this is where I am in life, and I'm actually quite happy here. And that could be interpreted as lazy. And people who are too self-directed could be interpreted as manipulative, as trying to get ahead. In all honesty, this comes down to one of these dimensions of culture. Then we have context, whether you see things formal or informal. Is your context one where you want things spelled out and very formal, and these are the boundaries? Or is it informal, where you'd rather get together and throw a bunch of ideas around? Again, people have a different preference. Whatever your way is probably not universal. We've got connection, whether it's inclusive or exclusive. That one ties into the relationship. If you have an inclusive view of connections, you want to pull as many people into everything as possible. If you have more of an exclusive view, then you would say, I'm going to pull this person in for this task, but I'm going to pull this person in for this task. You more specialize. Once again, it's not universal. How you do it is not necessarily how everyone does it. We've got expression, whether it's revealed or hidden. Do you think it's more important to get all of the information out, or is it more important to hold on to a little bit? Believe it or not, that differs across different cultures and different individuals. Some people would say, get all the emotion out so people know what they're dealing with. Some people would say, no, 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 keep your emotion in. That's personal and private. Decisions. Are you rules based or situation based? Is stealing always wrong, or is it okay if you're protecting a starving family? That's the whole basis of Les Miserables. The whole play is built on this little chunk of cultural dimension. Planning, again, is time or people more important? If you're putting together a plan, do you do it based on we have this much time and we need to get it done within this, no matter what happens? Or is planning more, we have this many people we need to take care of? Those are different. Communication, direct or indirect. British people tend to be a little more indirect. We tend to this is, I know I speak with an American accent now, it's very confusing, but deep down, I was raised in a British school system. And so we were taught to understate everything. We're very indirect. If something is terrible, we wouldn't say it's terrible. We would say something like, well, it's not what I would have done. And you just have to know that the way it's terrible. So are you direct or indirect? Would you just say that's terrible? Or would you say, well, it's not what I would have done? Then we come down to accountability. Is accountability something that you as an individual are responsible for? Are you self-driven? Or is accountability something the group drives? And that has bigger implications than we think, because how you set yourself up actually has a lot to do with that. Do you purposely put yourself into group situations so they can hold you accountable? Or would you rather work on your own and be responsible by yourself? And finally, we have status, ascribed or earned. Personally, I'm a little bit of both. I realize the British part of me sees very, very ascribed status. We have a monarch, and that's just ascribed, and I'm fine with that. And yet, in personal relationships, I'm far more of an earned person. You've got to earn the right to be my friend. You can't just be my friend because you're related to someone I know. And how are you on that particular mix? Like I said, these 12 dimensions are a great way to put language to intuition. Intuitively, we're all appearing somewhere on these scales. And if we put language to them, we can begin to understand maybe some of the cultural difficulties we have when we come up against somebody who looks at things a little bit different. I want to take you really quickly on another version of this. This tends to be something as far as interaction and culture, but underneath these behaviors is usually a system of values. And there's a system called the Enneagram, which is a fascinating system that someone very clever came up with, who knows how long ago. I'm sure Google will tell us. But the Enneagram basically looks at our own personal value system. So these values on your screen: perfection, usefulness, achievement, uniqueness, knowledge, security, fun, control, and peace. We all want those things. I don't think there's anybody who would say we don't want those to some degree. But what's really interesting is that we want them in different order. We want them in different levels. So we'll use me as an example. On this list of values, what I realize is peace is the most important one for me. I really just want everyone to get along. It's very, very important. Not that I don't want fun or control or perfection. I want all of those things. But if I had to put them in order, I would put peace first. And an interesting exercise for you to do is to put these in your own order. How would you rank each one of these? And then what gets really exciting and looks at individual culture is how that interacts with others. So I'll give you an example. One of my closest friends, his highest value is fun. Not that he doesn't like peace or anything else, but fun is his highest value. And sometimes we misunderstand each other because he'll do something that's fun, even if it destroys the peace a little bit. He'll poke a little bit at someone. He'll make fun of them just a little bit because it makes everyone laugh. Now, on my value system, that's not right. I think, well, you just disturbed the peace. You upset someone a little bit. Sure, everyone laughed, but you disturbed the peace. So for me, peace is more important than fun. For him, fun is more important than peace. He doesn't mind ruffling feathers just a little bit if he gets a laugh. I have another friend of mine who values perfection. And I can remember having a discussion with someone, and my friend heard it and got mad at me. He said, I know that you know some of those details aren't correct, and you didn't correct them. And I said, well, no, of course not. They didn't mean anything by it. They got a few little details wrong, but we were having a great conversation. I just wanted it to be peaceful. I would rather the conversation be peaceful and amicable than to stop it and say, no, 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 actually wrong. It's 3.7, not 3.6. But that's my value system. For my friend who values perfection, he would say, I don't care if you have to interrupt someone. Things need to be correct. It's worth bearing in mind that we do all run under a different set of values. And if you put these two charts together, if you put personal values in this order, and then you also put those 12 dimensions of culture, we get a way to paint, again, with language that we probably just had intuitively, a lot of the way we see the world. And we can use that as a bridge for a lot of the way other people see the world. I'm going to give you some practical. I like activities. Like I said, I like a lot of things. I want images. I want all kinds of things. So, in the practicality, because I think we need to link that to ideas, I want to talk about a fun little exercise that you can use with yourself, with others, whoever you want, in order to show a little bit of thinking outside of your own system. And I would love to say I came up with this. I didn't. Who knows who came up with this? Loads of people have used it. But it's the idea of using description, evaluation, and interpretation. So on your screen is an image. And if we were to do this activity, what you would need to do is study that image. And the first thing you would do is you would describe it, but only using cold, hard facts. So, for instance, I could not look at this and give an emotional interpretation. No, 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 no. Description is just what I can verifiably see. So I would say, can verifiably see someone in a wedding dress by a large body of water. They appear to be standing alone. It's not raining. That's it. That's about all. That's about all I could give you. There's something off in the distance. Can't tell what it is. Might be a ship. Might be a building. Whatever it is, there's water between the person in a wedding dress and whatever that structure is. Now, that's about all I can do for description. If I go much beyond that, I'm starting to get into more emotional things. So the next step is just that, to give an interpretation. In fact, to give two different interpretations. An interpretation is an explanation of what's happening. And they have to be guesses because we don't know. So I've started with description. I've given the facts: person in a wedding dress on the shore near a body of water across from a large structure. It's not raining. That's about all I got. Now, how could I interpret that? Well, one interpretation could be these are photos before a wedding. That's a very common thing. So perhaps this is just part of a wedding shoot. Maybe this is a bride on her way to a wedding. So that's very exciting. That's my interpretation. That's one. But I can come up with an alternate one. Perhaps this woman has just been stood up at her wedding, and somebody unrelated caught a photo of her after she'd been left at the altar. Those are two alternate interpretations. I don't know which one is true, but those are two things that I could take away from this one picture. And then we want to evaluate. We want to talk about the emotions that gives us, which in this one, I picked an easy one for time. That's pretty easy. If this is part of a photo shoot before a wedding, then that's joyous. That's happy. That's her about to get married, and a photographer taking pictures of her on her beautiful day. And the photographer will probably also get pictures of her groom, and it's a very happy thing. Alternatively, if this was, as I said before, she's been left at the altar and perhaps she ran away. Maybe her wedding was on that boat in the distance, and out of embarrassment she left, and now she's standing by the shore and she's very sad because what was supposed to be her greatest day was actually her saddest day. You can get all that from one picture. And I love this activity because it's very wise sometimes to realize there are multiple ways to see something. There are multiple ways to evaluate. I want peace above all else, but there are other priority systems in play. I tend to speak using the 12 dimensions. I tend to speak far more indirectly. That doesn't mean people who speak directly are wrong. And this activity I particularly like because it is a great reminder that there are more than one way to interpret the situation around us. There are more cultural lenses at play than we realize. And the more we can incorporate, the better cultural agility we have, the more rooms we add to that hallway that we constantly have access to. Now, I'm going to begin to close off today talking about empathy. And empathy is very important, so much so that a whole other presentation could be done about it. But to make it very quick and to fuse it in with culture, empathy, very simply, is the ability to be moved by the feelings of other people. And empathy is on the decline for loads of reasons. A study from the University of said that empathy has declined by about 40% in the last 30 years. That's huge. That means we are moved almost half as much by the feelings of others as we were just 3 decades ago. And if we're going to have cross-cultural understanding, we've got to have empathy. We've got to have our ability to be moved by the feelings of other people. In fact, it's often said that the traits of highly empathetic people are actually the very same traits we find in people with good cross-cultural skills. So, what do we do to employ empathy? I would say that if I had to sum it up quickly, and I'm trying to do that, it means we need to move beyond the golden rule. I remember being taught the golden rule, which was do to others what you would like done for you. And that's a good golden rule. But actually, if we employ empathy, if we realize that we often project and we're projecting our own value system, I want peace, but not everybody wants that above everything. I communicate indirectly, but not everybody does. If we can learn that not everybody does the things we do, if we can add multiple lenses, then we could replace the golden rule with what I have dubbed the platinum rule, just because that sounds better than gold. And the platinum rule would simply be do to others what they would like done for them. I'll use a simple example in personality, introverts and extroverts. I'm actually relatively introverted. And what that means is that if I'm stressed, I really just want left alone. If I'm having a stressful day, I just want to sort myself out in a quiet place. However, I have a lot of people around me who are extroverts. For an extrovert, when they're stressed, they might want company. They want support. They want people to talk about it with. Now, if we employ the golden rule, we can run into trouble. So if one of my extroverted friends saw me stressed out and did to me what they would want done to them, they would say, oh, Chris is stressed. I'm going to invite everybody around. We'll distract him. We'll talk it through. I'll just fill the house with people. That'll make him feel better. As an introvert, that would be miserable. As an introvert, I would have to look at my friend and say, why do you hate me? Why have you done this to me? I'm stressed and I just want to be alone. And yet you have done this thing. And the reverse is also true. If I looked at one of my extroverted friends who was stressed and said, "Ooh, they're stressed," I would want left alone. I'll just leave them alone. Then my extroverted friend would think, why have you abandoned me? I am stressed and I just want some support. And so doing to others what we want done to ourselves doesn't always work. In fact, that's really a very ethnocentrist view of things. So I think we can replace it with the platinum rule. I'm going to close with a little bit of a story because I love story time and we all deserve just a tiny bit of story. And I think there's a lot of story when it comes to the importance of cross-cultural understanding. For this story to make sense, you need to understand that I overheat very, very easily. I was not built for warm weather. I really wasn't. I sweat. It's unfortunate. I'm like a slug. You can tell where I've been by the trail of sweat that I leave behind me. I know that's what you all came here for today, to hear how I sweat. One particular summer, I was working with a friend of mine in Eastern Europe, and we had just finished a project, and we were taking trains to get home. And I needed to take a train from Zagreb, Croatia, to Budapest, Hungary. And it was the height of summer. I was sweating immensely. And we got to our train in the Zagreb station, and it had been parked out in the sunlight. And a train in the sun is just an oven. And so when we opened the door, a burst of heat came out. And I began to panic and thought, I'm going to sweat to death. And I took my seat on the train. It was an old-fashioned train that just had little compartments, little rooms with three seats facing three seats, so little rooms of six seats. And I tried to sit down, but the seats were leather, and I was so sweaty that I slid right off of them, which was a disaster. And I thought, all right, this is fine. When the train starts, I'm sure they'll turn the air conditioning on and I can cool off. And the train started. No air conditioning was turned on, not in any cabin. In fact, what was coming out of the vents was just more hot air, which just increased my sweating. And the friend I was with panicked himself and he said, we've closed the door to the compartment. If this heat continues, your sweat will eventually fill this compartment and we will drown in a disgusting aquarium of your sweat. And I said, shut up. Also, yes, that is possible. We began to panic. We tried to open the window. That would let some air in. The windows had been bolted shut. And this wasn't just the windows in our compartment. Every window on the train had bolts screwed into it, so you could not open it. And we really did begin to panic. But my friend had brought his house keys with him, and it turns out one of his house keys was the exact same width as the rivet on the top of the bolt. And so he was able to use his keys to unscrew the bolt and get a window open. And so he did. And the air came in. I began to cool off. Eventually, I dried off enough. I could even sit down on the chair without sliding off. It was fantastic. But then I had a thought. And I said to my friend, every compartment that we went into had the windows bolted shut. And he said, yes. I said, that means everyone on this train is slowly being cooked. And he said, yeah. And I said, we have to do something. And my friend panicked. And he said, what exactly are we going to do? You don't speak Hungarian or Croatian. What are you just going to go bursting into people's compartments and hope they let you open their windows? I said, well, when you put it like that, you know exactly what I'm going to do. Yes. My friend wouldn't come with me. He was too embarrassed. So I took his keys and I moved to the very first train compartment. And it was a sad sight. Inside were six people who had sort of melted into a human soup of sadness. And I flung the door open and I just announced, I'm here to liberate you, which sounds very dramatic, but I went with it. And I did. I moved in and I opened up the window. A breeze came in. The people began to revive and they said, I don't know, because I don't speak Hungarian or Croatian, but it sounded happy. And so I moved on to the next room and repeated the process. I flung the door open, said, I'm here to liberate you. I opened a window, people revived. And I had this down to a nice little routine. By about the fourth room, something different happened. I flung the door open. I said, I'm here to liberate you. And the people inside responded because the people inside room 4 were French. And the French national motto is égalité, fraternité, liberté. So they recognized that word. And I speak French very badly. And so I spoke to them in terrible French. And I said, Je suis ici pour la libération de votre fenêtre. I'm here for the liberating of your windows. And I did. I opened the windows and they were grateful. And they said, Oh, merci beaucoup, c'est trop chaud ici. I said, I know it is too hot in here. And I was about to move on. And I did. And these 4 French people came with me, which I wasn't expecting. And when I opened the next door, 4 French people all screamed "Liberté" before I could do anything, which scared the people inside. And I said, No, 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 I'm so sorry. It's nothing to panic. They're French. I'm going to open your windows. It's fine. And I did open their windows and I moved on, and the French people came, and then the people from that room came as well. And this trend just continued. I made it halfway down the train, and there were 40 people in the hall who, on cue, every time I would open a new door, everyone would scream, Liberté! People thought that we were robbing the train. I would open a door, everyone would scream, people would just hand me money. And I said, No, 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 we're not here to rob you. We're just going to liberate your windows. We ended up opening the windows on the whole train, and the whole train was hanging out with each other. In fact, when we arrived in Budapest, people didn't want to stop hanging out. We about 90 of us got off and everyone helped each other. Some people didn't know where to go and other people knew how to guide them. Some people had nowhere to stay, other people could help them. And I watched this beautiful thing unfold. We created a Facebook group called the Great Croatian Train Liberation. I went to one of their weddings just a couple of years ago. I love this story because, in all honesty, it underlies in so many ways the incredible importance of cross-cultural understanding. People think I make this stuff up. So there's a picture. Look at all those windows that I opened. The reality is, I think the imagery here is really, really important. Cross-cultural understanding is necessary, not just because we have a decline in empathy, not just because it makes us so much more creative and productive, but because we live in a world that is more compartmentalized than we would like. And it's going to take a degree of cross-cultural understanding to be willing to move into different rooms, to be able to add different rooms to our cultural identity in order to solve the global level problems that we're facing. The reality is that I do think with some cross-cultural understanding, we can do amazing things. And so being able to change our perspective, being able to see culture as something that's not just mutually exclusive, but a set of rooms that we can continually add to, and being able to put the language behind cross-cultural understanding, being able to break it down into our priorities, being able to break it down into different aspects of culture, those are the tools we need so that we really can open up and liberate and bring people together. The world is full of trains that probably do need liberating from the heat in metaphorical ways. And I think with some cross-cultural understanding, we stand a far better chance of being able to do that. So here are some references. Of course, I'll very happily email all this stuff to you as well. Thank you so much for giving me your time and attention. I realized I threw a lot of information, but I was very excited and I couldn't pare it down any smaller than that. So that's how we have it. And now I do think, oh, it's time for Q&A. So I'm going to hand it over to highly trained service professional Nina, who will tell us what to do from here.
Well, you had me in stitches, and the comedian in you definitely did not disappoint. And your stories are phenomenal. But that's from me, my side. I would like anybody who would love to ask Chris a question regarding bridging worlds within your classroom as educators, or maybe from international institutions, how we bridge cultures together in such a place. How do we, wait, I wrote it down. How do we start accepting, adapting, integrating? How do we change from ethnocentrism to ethno-relativism?
Oh,
Anybody
there's
want
so
to
many
ask
ways.
any questions? How do we bring those skills into our environment, our classrooms, our families, our dinner tables? Maybe you want to answer that.
Well, I do think, I mean, as you said, there are so many ways that we can bring in the cross-cultural understanding, and maybe that's actually a really good place to start. Is even being able to start with our families at the dinner table, because even within a family, there probably are a whole bunch of different sets of value systems. For me, the reason that I put those up was I love the big idea of things, but the practicality is really helpful. So even just being able to take those 9 Enneagram traits and have your family list them out in order. It might be very surprising to see just how different or how similar your value systems are. I think that it's a great way to start because the more we're able to put language to those things intuitively, that helps a ton with cross-cultural understanding. Just beginning to train ourselves that not everyone uses the same lens as we do, and that actually being able to use their lens too might be helpful. So again, introverts and extroverts, all sorts of different ways to look at things. The way that you feel soothed might not be the way somebody else feels soothed. What stresses you might not stress someone else. But until we intellectually give that language, we run on assumptions. And our assumption is you must be stressed by what stresses me. And I'm stressed. So why aren't you stressed? You must be a very uncaring person. And so we leap to conclusions. So I think a good place to start with all that is just simply around the dinner table. Being able just to map out some of those differences helps us see that there are multiple lenses at play.
Just communication, open communication, and finding out that your family members are possibly more different to you than you think or more similar.
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
so we have a question from Mr. Jim Crawley from Hope College. Hello, Jim. He is one of our webinar alumni, shall I say. Chris, can you give your perspective on how international school teachers and counselors can best prepare their students for their move to the US if this is where they want to come to university?
Oh, good question. I'm a big fan of Jim Crowley. It is a great question. I would say one of the uniquenesses about especially college in the US is that it's some degree of a familiar culture, just because US culture is pervasive in media, it's pervasive in news and things like that. And so we trick ourselves into thinking, oh, well, it'll be easy. I've seen I watch TV. I know what America's like. But my biggest piece of advice would be in preparing for that is to treat the US as a completely foreign country, just because there are going to be things that you don't realize. Once again, we all project. And as someone who grew up as a military brat on American military bases, I thought that I was prepared for the US. I thought I've been on military bases. I got this. I've seen TV. And the reality is there were still differences. America it ends up being more direct as far as communication. And so, Americans will just say, but it's hot outside. Whereas in British English, we would say, well, it's a bit warm, isn't it? And there are minor little things like that. But the reality is, I think one of the best ways to prepare is to not be caught off guard by thinking that you already know US culture. Just with any other culture, there's more complexity to it. So being able to actually open yourself up to go in almost as a blank slate and to be able to say, all right, there's going to be a bunch of different systems and I need to be ready for that. And so as far as preparing students for that, I think that preparing students with cross-cultural understanding is actually as, if not even more useful for heading to the US as opposed to other countries. Because again, we think that we've got the US figured out, but it deserves the attention that everywhere else does. So, again, using these tactics, being able to understand where you stand as far as your culture and priority, and being open to the fact that it will be different in the US. And one of the beautiful things about the US is it is a culture of cultures. And so a lot of times that makes them more direct because there's a lot of different stories in play. And even understanding that, it took me a while to understand, compared to Brits, the US isn't rude. It's just that there's a lot of stories going on. And so you have to be more direct. But I do. I think that being able to understand that there's more subtlety to the US than we may realize. Just because you've seen it on TV doesn't mean you've automatically understood it. It's going to make the experience so much better if you're open to it in that respect.
Thanks, Chris. Jim is giving you a thumbs up there. Yeah, we're all a melting pot of cultures due to globalization and how small the world's becoming. And yeah, just like you said, just because you watch an American TV show doesn't mean you know what happens in America. So basically, I am going to ask you one question from my side. Because of globalization and wanting to increase empathy and tolerance and acceptance, what's one small step that we can start instilling in school children
Ooh,
to
such a
start
good question.
opening their minds to this big concept that they will become aware of and essentially progress during their lives?
Yeah. Oh, such a good question. Um, you know, to answer that, I have been able to speak with marvelously clever people. I've gotten to interview cross-cultural experts and all sorts of things. And one of the most common things that I hear, as far as how do we increase our cross-cultural awareness, one of the most common pieces of advice from across the board is to understand the incredible importance of curiosity. That sounds really, really simple, but we take for granted that we tend to move away from curiosity. And kids come with curiosity, annoyingly so. I'm sure many people have gone through the age where, you know, when kids are maybe about three or so, and they just want to know why everything. But why? But why? But why? And that can be repetitive, but actually that curiosity is really important. And cultivating that curiosity in students, cultivating that curiosity in children and young people is incredibly important because that curiosity is what makes us open to all sorts of things. When that curiosity closes and we begin to make assumptions, and we do, our brains are looking for pattern recognition. And so it's far too easy for us to build neural pathways that say, well, you know, four times out of five, it goes this way, so it's always going to go this way. It makes sense why we do that. But if we can cultivate curiosity, curiosity means instead of us saying, well, he did that because he's rude, curiosity says, well, why did he do that? Which is the gateway to maybe he thinks differently than me. Maybe his priorities are different than mine. Maybe his cultural background is different. But to even get to those, we have to have that opening door of curiosity. So being able to encourage and cultivate that curiosity, being able to instill as a habit the ability not to jump to conclusions with people, but to actually constantly think through, but why did they do that? And what's a good reason for them having done that? Curiosity, it's the key to so many things.
Thank you. That makes perfect sense. That makes perfect sense. I heard somebody, does somebody want to unmute and ask a question? No? Okay. So with that, I'm going to wrap up and thank you, Chris, for answering my question, for answering Jim's question, for, oh, wait, one more, if you don't mind, if you have the time.
Yeah.
So Susanna says, can you give insight to platforms or tools that can enhance counselors to guide students to be internationally minded?
Ooh, absolutely. There's quite a bit now available on the internet. I would say a good place to start. I am a big fan of a group called KnowledgeWorks out of the UAE. In fact, they have a division just on education, and their website is knowledgeworksx.com. Ooh, I can even put that in the chat, I think. I might even be able to type at the same time that I can talk. No, this works. X.com. That's a great place to start. They have a list, for instance, of those 12 dimensions of cultures and things like that. They're a great resource. Another great resource is FIGT.org, which is Families in Global Transition. They have a fair amount of resources as well. There are quite a few others. There's TCK training. Oh, I'm just putting all sorts of things in the chat now. TCKtraining.com have resources. But all of those I think are a good place to start as far as how do we make students aware that they can be more internationally minded. Those websites have some great resources to start. There's also a plethora of podcasts and things like that. I'll put my email in. Feel free to email me if you'd like more resources or further information, because there's great stuff out there by marvelously clever people.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Chris. Thanks for all that info. And thank you all for joining us today. And Chris, you emphasized such an important discussion that needs to happen and skills that need to be brought into classrooms, into just everybody's lives, so that, excuse me, so that we can navigate this current global climate we find ourselves in. As I said, we're a melting pot of cultures, and we're getting closer and closer together because of technology. But as we wrap up the session today, I just want to tell you a little bit about our professional development program. We have designed a program specifically for educators to grow and develop life skills education in the classroom. And just as Chris emphasized the importance of empathy and curiosity and adaptability and integration, our program aims to equip educators to help facilitate students to gain these skills for personal growth and be well prepared for their futures and professional success. So if you're looking to enhance your teaching techniques or expand your curriculum, our program provides the training and resources to help support you and support you in learning how to facilitate your students to become more self-aware and better global citizens. So if you want to find out more, please don't hesitate to contact us, reach out either on our website, or you can email us directly. And we're here to help you make a meaningful impact on your life and your students' lives. So once again, thank you, Chris, for honoring us with your time and your nuggets of wisdom and your stand-up show. It was awesome. And we will be sending a survey to you guys, so please feel free to share your feedback with us, your takeaways, what you learned, what we could expand upon or do better. But we do hope that we earned the privilege of your time. And until next time, let's help make the world a better place, one essential skill at a time and one student at a time.
Thanks so much,
Thanks,
everybody.
Chris. Thanks, everyone.